right. We are coming to you. This is Susan Norwell. We've got Kourtney Barnum up at the top, and we've got Lizzie down at the bottom. And Lizzie is our newest member of the RetU team, and we're really happy to have an SLP on board as we are here speaking about the features that we all love in a device. Because parents are asking us all the time, or they have a device that isn't working for them, or so we decided we just put together a little, we're not going to sing or dance, but we will put together a little bit of a list of what our favorite things are. So I'm going to start with some of my people, especially my teenagers who like to be outside because they like to go shopping and they like to go to Starbucks. And it's really important that they have non-glare glass on their devices. The devices now, there are many of them, not all of them, that are really good outside so that it doesn't pick up so much glare that you can't see them. And so that's I think an important feature, especially as kids become more social, adults are more social, and they're out in the community more. This is my big bugaboo. It just so happens right now I am in the midst of trying to make books in a different software system that I'm used to. I use Communicator a lot. Communicator is a Tobii Dynavox product, and we are committed to our girls not only learning to communicate, but to learn to read and to write. The ultimate form of communication is writing, and they can't learn to write without reading. And so we have to look for ways that we can adapt books, especially for our early readers, so they can learn the tracking, the motor action of the tracking. And Communicator has been my go-to. It's easy to use. For me, I understand it's not easy for everybody, but I can copy and paste books and fill them in and have a template, and it goes really easily. I'm right now trying to make a book in Snap because we have some kids that have a TD Pilot, and the TD Pilot will not let them use Communicator. So we're kind of stuck. Like, how do I teach these kiddos to read? Except the books are taking me hours to make. And so the feasibility of me making as many books as I already have in Communicator is pretty limited, and so we're trying to figure out some different ways to get books into their hands that they can access with their eyes. So again, we look at different devices, and so you can look at like a grid pad. I have kids on a grid pad, but the grid pad has to run the Tobii camera in order for it to work with Communicator. And there are some people that like Mind Express. I have nothing against Mind Express. It was a little complicated for me to learn, and not everybody has it. It's not as readily available in the States as it is in Europe. So Communicator is my go-to, and really helps in terms of teaching kids how to read. All right. Take it away, Lizzie.
Awesome. So because it is an AAC device, and the primary use of AAC device is communication, we need to make sure that our devices have robust language systems. We also need to make sure that those language systems are set up to be eye gaze friendly. Not all language systems on devices are eye gaze friendly. A good test is for you as a parent, an educator, a speech therapist, to try it out yourself with your eyes. If it is too hard for you to navigate with your eyes, it is going to be too hard for your client or your student or your child. We also want to make sure that it's very user-friendly for editing, and that it's very customizable, so that you can move buttons around easily. You can update pictures of family members, places they like to go, change the symbols really easily, make it as functional as possible for the child.
And I think, Lizzie, I don't mean to interrupt you, but also importing and exporting. I will say I have found some language systems that it's very, very easy to import and export pages as we add, and because we are constantly not changing pages, but adding pages to support our clients. And some of them I have found to be very, very difficult to import in, and it is very confusing. Whereas there is other ones where it is very simply, boom, we can import and export very simple. So that's something to be looking at as well.
You know, Lizzie, I like what you said about having the language system be easily accessible. So we know that Grid SuperCore is the only language system that was designed for eye gaze users. All right? There have been a ton of adaptations to Snap to make it feasible, better for our girls in terms of motor planning, and they now have a motor planning set.
Thank you.
So those are two that we know of that have been proven to be easier for them to access, which I think is helpful when we're thinking short-term and long-term for kids. Yeah.
I think specifics that make layouts accessible for eye gaze is that there's no scrolling. Everything is kind of in categorized buttons. You have access to sentences, not just single words. It's a lot of effort to use eye gaze, so the more that we can do to make things a little bit simpler, the better.
Right, and by simpler, we don't mean less buttons.
Yes.
What we mean is easy to access. So if your language system has a setup where you have to hit things in certain order in order for it to make sense, that's really difficult when you're really apraxic. So we're talking about our Rett population.
Exactly.
Specifically Rett population, where motor planning and apraxia also hits the eyes, and sometimes you miss-hit a button. But if it doesn't take you off someplace where you don't want to go, it's much more helpful for you to regroup and make meaning.
And I think also in terms of that, making sure that the language system is intuitive. I've worked with some systems that where the words are placed, if it doesn't make sense to me as a educator, I don't see how it makes.
How are they going to make the connection?
Right. How are they going to make those connections between, I want to find this word and it's here. If I have to search for words every time I'm looking for a word, that's an issue, because that means that my kids are not going to be, our clients are not going to be able to search for words as easily as we are. So that's something to be thinking about.
The other thing I would look for is that it can translate to many languages. We are now international at Rett Syndrome, so that we're Rett Syndrome at Rett University. We are international. So we're dealing with clients with all different kinds of languages, which means it's got to be flexible enough for us to be able to have a good voice in a different language and good language in a different language. And most of that depends on good conjugation. Yeah, especially in French.
Yeah. And that's important. It's important to know, too, that we're not just talking about young kids who are getting these devices, but we're talking about women later in life who have established language systems. They just don't have a way to express it. So, they've been developing the language their whole lives, listening to people talking. So they already created a system. So the way that they use their language on their device might be different than we expect them to. So making sure that they are able to access that appropriately is really important. Also talking about what a device trial should look like. So every state, I'm not super certain about other countries and what their policies are, but I know in the United States, most people either go through device trials through a school district or through insurance. When you're going through insurance is where I've done most of my experience. You are required to trial a certain amount of devices for a certain number of days, and it's a very specific outline per your specific insurance. So definitely find somebody who knows what that process needs to look like. So all of the trials can be set up and ready to go in the right way so that things can be as streamlined as possible. We also want to make sure that the devices you're trialing are comparable to each other in the device itself and in the features that it has. So when we're looking at devices, we want to make sure that, we're trialing this one device from company A, and the rep that's coming to help us and our speech therapist has set up these pages that is super robust, has all of the language we could possibly have. And then company B brings a device that is not super developed. It has very few words. Maybe it's like a 4x5 grid that has just your core words, really hard to access. But that system might still have the capability to look like company A's system. So it's important to ask if there are other page sets they can use. You're not just trialing the device, but you're trialing page sets as well. Right. Making sure that there's a language system available that is as appropriate for your child, student, client as possible.
Right, I had this happen to a family where company A put them on a 20 grid, company B put them on a 4 grid. They had like, more, go, and want, okay? And the mom said to me, this device was so hard to use with only 4 buttons. I had to keep moving the pages to find more words so that the device got faulted. In actuality, she did better with her eyes on that device than she did on the other device. But because the language sets were like comparing apples and oranges, she never got a sense of what the device could do for her daughter.
And
so
that
it
happens.
was really important. We stepped in at RETU and said, okay, come on, this is not a fair trial. We need to figure this out, because the mom was prejudiced against the device that actually ended up working because of how it was set up.
And this happens often. We hear this often with our trials. And so as a family or as a speech therapist, as you're sitting in the trials with your people, make sure you say, can we make sure on company, as Lizzie said, on company A's device, we had a very robust communication system. So can we make sure that we have comparable to that, so I can truly see how my loved one or my client is using the device, and make sure that, like, if it's a 20 grid set on one, you're going to have a 20 grid set on the other one, so you can truly see what the child and the device can do.
I'm going to hop in real fast and come back to the communication before you hit mounting, because I just remembered something. You know, the devices that are not going to let you run communicator so we can do literacy, there's a couple of them that are out there, okay? One of them in particular, parents really like because it's Apple-based, and that's what the parents like because they're used to it.
Right.
But we've got to remember that the device is not for you. The device is for the kid, and you've got to be asking, okay, am I going to be able to put books on this? Is somebody going to be able to teach my kid to read? If you're not sure when you're trialing a device, just email us at RETU.
Exactly.
I mean, fine. We will answer your questions specifically. We just, in this particular talk, we don't want to go this one, that one, this one, because we're, you know, there's a lot of good things that are out there, but is the good thing good for your kid and what you want to accomplish with it? So that's why you would ask us a specific question, and then you can find out who has what, because it's not just what might be easier for you. It might be what's easier for you isn't so great for your kiddo. So I have a family right now I'm working with where one of them they have 2 devices, one for the books and one not for the books. Right. That's really cumbersome.
And it's important to know, too, that when you're going through the device process, different insurances are different, especially when it comes to pediatrics versus adults. Most devices can only be replaced through insurance every 5 years. So it is a 5-year decision that you are making.
5-year commitment.
Yeah. So, and that's not to be scary, but it's to make you consider, okay, what are my goals for my child in 5 years? They may be 2 while you're starting these trials, so you might not even be thinking about reading, because not many 2-year-olds.
But
I make books for my 2-year-olds because my 1-year-old, 2-year-old grandkids, they pick up a book and turn the pages. So I made simple little books on the toe beat in Communicator. So Communicator can go on some other things, like the grid pad, it can. And made them so that they could turn the pages. And I point to the words. It doesn't matter if they're reading or not. They just have to learn what a book is.
Right.
You know?
And here's the thing. As Susan and I can both say, we both have clients who have started a device, AAC device, at a very young age. And the amount of growth that we've seen, not only in their communication, but in their literacy ability is huge. And it, like, when you're thinking about your kiddo, you need to think about, what are your goals? Our girls and boys need something that they can do independently, and being able to read is a huge independent goal for them. So it is a vital part of what we are doing with our kids.
All right. There we go. All right, go ahead, Lizzie. We'll let you do mounting now, because that is really important.
Okay. We're going to ignore my dog barking in the back.
My 2-year-old granddaughter might be screaming any minute, so you just go.
So when we talk about mounting, there's a few different things that we can talk about. And I may pass this off to Kourtney to start another topic really quickly, so that...
Don't get the dog quiet. Yeah. We'll let you do that.
Go for it. Okay, so while she's doing that, we'll come back to mounting. The other thing that we really need to think about are a couple of different programs. There's a great program on one of the devices called Gaze Viewer, which allows us to, I always call it the magic fairy dust, because it allows, when you turn it on, it allows you to see where the girls' and boys' eyes are going, even if they're not activating the buttons. And for our new users, this is a really great tool to have, diagnostic tool to have. For one of my young ladies, you can also record video with sound and the things, and it shows you where their hot spots are. So it might be that client has a lot of right hand side issues, and so we were trying to see was she getting her eyes over to the left hand side, and we were able to record a session and be able to watch it. So that's a really great tool to have that is only available on certain devices. Lizzie, I'm going to go ahead and let you go back to mounting, and then we can come back to mine.
So when we talk about mounting devices, again, you can reevaluate for a new device most of the time every 5 years. With those reevaluations, you can submit for a new mount. So with your first device, it's important to know, A, does this device stand on the table on its own? Or do I need to order a table stand or a table mount to make it work for my child just at the table? We also need to think, okay, if your child has a wheelchair, we want to make sure that their device is accessible to them wherever they go out in public, so that you can bring it with them and expose them to language everywhere. Most devices, when you order them through a manufacturer, can be ordered with a wheelchair mount, with your child's wheelchair specifications so that it fits their wheelchair and the device. There's also floor stands, which can be kind of big and clunky, but they are appropriate for quite a few different situations. So it really just depends on what you're looking at and what your needs are. I always recommend to request the mount that is the most functional right now. So if the device can stand on its own on the table, we probably won't need a table mount right away, if ever. So going for a wheelchair mount might be the most functional at that time, so that you can take it with them whenever they go. Most wheelchair mounts can be adapted to new wheelchairs. So if you're up for a new wheelchair before you're up for a new device, the mount should transfer, and if not, you should be able to get a device specific to that wheelchair. So things can always change on either side of the equation when it comes to mounts. But that is it on mounts.
And in terms of mounting, just to go back to that really quick, Lizzie, is the weight. I know I'm actually talking to a mom who saw a post that we had posted about devices, and the weight of the device. Trust me, Susan and I have both traveled for RetU with the old, really bulky, really heavy devices. Most of the devices are becoming lighter. But double check the weight with them, because that is something to be thinking about. The other thing I was going to say is make sure with your communication software, especially for our kiddos who are not in wheelchairs and who are up and moving around, that they have that their communication software can maybe be used on an iPad as well, so that they can still have access to their language system without eye gaze, if possible. So I'm going to use SnapCore as a TD Snap as a example. I have Grid too. I have a kiddo who's on Grid, who we also have her Grid on her iPad. Her communication partner does partner assisted scan with her. It is not eye gaze friendly, and she still uses her yes, no, and partner assisted scan to communicate. So it's not carrying the big heavy, the device outside, but she still has that availability of a device outside when she's out there.
When you were talking about size, it made me think that a lot of times people think that the bigger device is better for eye gaze. Like, it's got bigger symbols, so it's going to be easier. Except what I want you to know is that when I went totally to Zoom during COVID, all of a sudden my eyes were exhausted because I had to scan from one side of the screen to the other side of the screen all day long. The smaller the screen, Now, I've got a big laptop I use now, but when I was on my laptop versus my desktop is huge. I have a huge screen. It is much harder on my eyes, the huge screen. I can see the girls better, their eyes better, so that's why I use it. But it's harder on my eyes.
Right.
So we always think bigger is better, but it isn't. It's actually easier for them to get across the screen without as much eye movement, and eye movement is exhausting. So bigger isn't always better. You should try both sizes if you're not sure, but typically all my kids are on a smaller size. They're on a 13, not a 16.
It's funny. One of my girls has just moved to her first device was a 15, and she's now down to a 13. And the amount of language I'm seeing out of her, because she doesn't have to work as hard to get across the screen, is absolutely huge.
Right. And we used to all think that until we actually tried using it.
So, and that's the thing, too. Teachers, parents, you try the device. You use the device. I get on my device.
Not be so critical of how long it's taking them to learn it.
Right. It's a hard thing to use your eyes. It is very hard. And in regards to that, making sure when you are getting a device that the device can be calibrated to your child's eyes.
Not just yours.
Not just yours. We've had people who have their child cannot calibrate on their device. So the device is not truly set up for the child because it's still based off of the parent's eyes.
It's not picking up their eyes well enough. And then we had an experience at camp where we gave them a different device and they calibrated right away, and the parents were like, oh my gosh, it's not her.
Right.
It was the device.
It's the device.
So that's why I think it's really important that you try various devices, like Lizzie was saying, you try them out. But if they're having trouble getting their eyes in the box and then they're having trouble with their eyes being read, that is not helpful. You don't want to start out that way. It's discouraging for them.
Right. The other thing to look at, too, is the camera. I know I've worked with a couple different devices, and, for example, I know of one device where the camera box is very small. And so for our kiddos who move around and kind of are a little bit all over the place, whenever they're out of the camera box, it's not picking up their eyes. So that's a thing to look at. Make sure that we want the widest camera box as possible so that all those movements, because our girls' bodies and our boys' bodies do not always stay in one place, as we all know. And the more ways that they have to access their device and be able to say what they need to say when their body's moving all over the place is a huge benefit to them. The other thing that we want to think about, too, in terms of our devices is remoting in. For example, for us, we have gone, as most of you know, very full virtual. Let me try that again. We have gone virtual for most of our clients. I still travel for RetU, but we do most of our clientele via virtual remote, which means we are remoting into the child's device. There are devices, I'm going to call it out because Apple is the one that we cannot remote into. And there are other devices that it does not work as well to remote into. And that is a huge.
So we can't help a family set up a language system.
Right.
They have to be with us while we're doing it, and we have to talk them through it, which takes longer, which costs them more, where we're so used to doing it, we can just dump and go. But the other thing is it's not that I don't want parents to learn to model, but I think a good way to teach them to model is by modeling on the device. But I remote into schools. I'm teaching all the time. And it has made progress go so much faster because the school has bought in, the school's getting coaching, but if I can't remote in the devices it's just not, it's hard. It's so much harder. And what we're seeing is, especially with our kiddos where we can compare between ones where we can and we can't, we were just talking about this the other day. We think that progress is slower because we're actually having to teach the parent and the kid at the same time. And new users don't like to wait.
No.
So you're getting a session, but you're getting a session that's being translated to the parent and then to the kid. And now you're losing the kid.
Right.
And it's not that we don't want parents to do it, but not for the whole hour. That would be a good thing to do for maybe 15 minutes, but not the whole hour. So that is a thing to consider. And I know for my families that are in Europe and my parents' families in Australia and my parents in New Zealand, I used to get there maybe once every, 5 years or every other year or every 10 years. Now they can see me on a weekly basis, but they couldn't if I couldn't remote into their devices.
Right. And it's a huge, to be able to, very simple thing, but change the mouse color when we remote into a girl's device and they can see where our mouse is going and especially for our new users, putting the gaze viewer on and then watching with my mouse and modeling where we're going and showing them, oh, I think you mean this word. And they're like, it helps to build that relationship with our girls and boys as well. And that is a huge thing when it comes to our kids. So that remote access it's a game changer. And I know we're not the only ones. I know some of our SLPs are working, virtual and being able to remote in and things as well. So it's not just us. We're thinking about all those different people who could possibly remote in to your child's device to be able to use the device. Because here's the simple fact, as we all know, modeling is the #1 predictor of our kiddos learning how to communicate. And the more they have modeling and the more people are modeling on their device, the more that they are going to be able to communicate. And so that modeling and being able to remote in to model is such a huge important aspect. So I think we covered everything.
I think we did. I think we covered everything that was on our list and did it just really well, I might say.
So.
I'll give us all a couple.
Here's the thing. If you have questions, I'm actually meeting with 2 families this week there was a post on one of our Facebook things, or actually one of the other Facebook things, and I said, hey, if you have questions, please email me. I'm meeting with those parents. We're going to do a quick talk about what is available on the devices. If you have questions, please email Susie, myself, or Lizzie, because we are here to support and help you guys get the best device. We don't want, so often I think we've all heard, we meet up with a parent and they're like, oh my gosh, I got this device and I thought it was so great and I hate the language system and it's not working and my daughter's not using it and I don't know what to do.
And then 5 years later, they can get a new one.
And
so
then
that's what we're trying to avoid. We really are trying to avoid that issue. But are you going to post this like on Facebook and Instagram?
We're going to post it.
Emails will be down in the
Yes,
someplace.
We're going to post it all over our social media. It's also going to be posted on our main page, and we're going to do a spreadsheet kind of going over all the different devices that we know of and that we have used with our girls and seen success with, and which ones have the
features, different features.
Thank you.
Yes, that would be the word you were looking for. It's okay.
It's a long day.
5 days device in case you need it later.
But like I said, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. And especially when it comes to these devices, because as Lizzie said, it's a 5-year commitment. And we want to make sure that we are getting, the best out of our kiddos so that they can truly, we want them to show their sass because Lord knows they have some sass and we want them to be able to show it. So.
Right. All right. So thank you, everybody. All right. Bye. Bye.